Good morning, everybody. I'm ready to get started. So if you'd grab a seat, we'd get started with today's meeting. Welcome back, everyone, to our second day here in Cody. The weather's fantastic. The building's really fantastic as well. With that, I call this meeting of the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission to order. If you have a cell phone on, please be sure it's silenced. Right now, to establish a quorum, I'll have a roll call vote of the commissioners. Commissioner Lundvall. Here. Commissioner Jolovich. Here. Commissioner Masterson. Here. Commissioner Ladwig.
Here.
Commissioner Roberts.
Here.
Commissioner Bell.
Here.
Thank you. For members of the public who wish to address the commission today on any agenda items, please take a moment, fill out a comment form located at the registration table at the entrance into the room. If you're participating via Zoom, you need to submit an advanced comment prior to the start of this meeting. If you'd still like to comment, please contact the host of the meeting and we'll try and get you scheduled in as soon as we can. As we work through the agenda, I encourage the public to take a minute and address the commission on whatever topic we're discussing. To ensure everyone has the opportunity to speak, please be courteous to others. Keep your comments brief, short, and specific. I will limit your time if you get on a sideways track. With that, would you stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Having our agenda, are there any additions or corrections to the agenda, commissioners? Seeing none, hearing none. Our first presenter this morning is Mr. McBarnes. Chris, are you ready? No, Chris isn't here. I forgot. We did a switch. Today, Chris will be replaced by Nate. Good morning, Nate.
Good morning. Director Nesbitt, President Brokaw and the commission. I'm Nate Brown with the Wildlife Fund, the operations manager. My pleasure to make the Wildlife Fund's presentation today in place of Chris McBarnes, unable to attend. Thank you. Under the direction of the commission and the department, the fund has taken a leadership role in fundraising for many projects across the state of Wyoming that continue to support the work of the department and showcase the importance of partnerships that support Wyoming's wildlife. Last night, many of you had the opportunity to make sure this is on, had the opportunity to try the product of one of these partnerships in the Pronghorn Pilsner at the Outdoor Hall of Fame event last night. This is a groundbreaking partnership that's a collaboration between our own signature initiative, Wildlife for Tomorrow, the Haub School of Environment and Natural Resources, and Wind River Brewing Company in Pinedale, Wyoming. This is the first beer that be canned and distributed across Wyoming that is giving back a portion of the proceeds to wildlife conservation projects across the state perpetually. So this will remain in their stable for years to come. They're fully behind it. It'll be canned and available all across the state of Wyoming. We're currently working with distributors, bars, and restaurants to make this a household brand that will continue to raise money for projects for years to come. I want to give especially thanks to Ken Roberts for attending our October 20th release party in Pinedale. Ken's been a supporter of Wildlife for Tomorrow from the beginning, and I want to make sure and tell you thank you for your generous donation of a commissioner's tag. Through that funding, we were able to advertise and build awareness about these projects. Thank you, Ken. As an example of some of the projects that money goes towards, there's wildlife barriers, disease research, and habitat. So far, in just about a year and a half, Wildlife for Tomorrow has funded 7 projects. Over $300,000 has been raised from the business sector, and over 90 businesses and investors are on board. I'd encourage everyone to look at the Wildlife for Tomorrow website and learn more about these projects. It's great stuff. Excuse me. I went too far. Another great example of collaboration and partnerships that do great things for wildlife are the highway crossing projects.
we've had the unbelievable opportunity to have 2 completed projects just this summer. It was my honor to be at the Dry Piney ribbon cutting ceremony. That's a project that, to echo the words of Angie Bruce, it's been about 20 years since we've had a highway crossing project in our state. And so it's an amazing thing that we're starting to really push these to the forefront of the public's attention and get a lot of them done. And so just as an example of another project, the I-25 Buffalo to KC Wildlife Crossing Project is another one that the Wildlife Fund in only 4 years of existence was able to lead the charge with fundraising for I-25. That project is also very near completion. Had the pleasure to go meet with the governor and some other folks and do a video that'll be coming very soon to showcase some of these projects as well. Some of the future projects that are still out there is the Highway 189 South Kemmer project. You guys have known about this from the forefront or from the very beginning. This project is a huge project. The Wildlife Fund, with a lot of other partners, has secured nearly $1 million in private funding. The request for proposal to the federal DOT has been sent and we're awaiting their response. I also want to touch on one more project, the US 26 project. We were just in Jackson for the Greater Yellowstone Coordinating Committee. Chip Jenkins, the Grand Teton Superintendent, has shown great interest in partnering with the Wildlife Fund and the department to showcase US 26 as a gateway to the park. Also 189 obviously is another gateway, but it's great to see players on the national level wanting to support the work of the department and of all these partners. So it's another great opportunity. So on to the Pooled Migration Fund and some recent contributions. This is our map. Many of you are familiar with the 5 core areas. This is a project that was created through the department to shore up and build a third leg of the stool for this migration funding that's available through the USDA and the big game pilot. I want to introduce someone today from NextEra Energy. His name is Mac Fuller. I'd like Mac to come up here. NextEra Energy Resources, through their foundation, made a $50,000 contribution that was made to support phase 2 of the Pooled Migration Fund's implementation of projects that support the USDA big game pilot. Through voluntary land conservation, habitat restoration, and long-term private land stewardship, the big game pilot aims to conserve migratory big game populations. It's my pleasure to introduce Mac Fuller. Thank you. Yeah.
Morning, commissioners. As Nate said, my name is Mac Fuller. I'm an environmental manager for NextEra Energy Resources. We are the largest generator of renewable energy from the wind and the sun. First, thanks to Chris, Nate, and the Wildlife Fund for inviting us here and giving me the opportunity to speak with you all. NextEra Energy Resources develops, constructs, and operates renewable energy projects around the world to produce electricity. Our company currently owns and operates 3 wind energy centers in Wyoming, with 3 additional in development. As a company, we are dedicated to quality, committed to environmental stewardship, and care about supporting the communities our projects call home. In addition to creating jobs, improving roads, and contributing to the local tax base, wind sites and renewable energy projects provide indirect income to local communities and businesses. At NextEra Energy Resources, we are committed to conservation and stewardship for wildlife and their habitats. We work hard to meet and/or exceed all regulatory requirements and work with the communities to ensure that our projects are sited appropriately. This includes close coordination with the Wyoming Game and Fish Habitat Protection Program and local biologists from around the state. Our charitable arm, the NextEra Energy Foundation, is proud to support the Wildlife Fund Pooled Migration Fund and its goal to conserve big game populations that migrate across working lands in Wyoming. This aligns with our mission to support sustainable practices and find real-world solutions to address conservation challenges. We're glad and excited to be able to work with community partners to help support this beautiful state so it can remain a great place for generations. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Matt. I just want to say thank you very much to NextEra Energy for taking a leadership role, in my opinion, with regard to energy and the energy sector's role in migration research and migration protection. So it's pretty cool to see this happen. In addition to NextEra's commitment, I also want to thank the Wilberforce Foundation. They've been an early supporter of this whole thing, and they also contributed another $50,000 to support phase 2 of the pooled migration fund as well. Again, I want to also just, tell you personally, Brian, thank you very much for the director's role as a committee member with the Greater Yellowstone Coordinating Committee. Director Nesvic's work as a committee member is critical to bringing the department and the commission to the forefront of critical decisions at the national level. As a result of Director Nesvic's role on the committee, the Wildlife Fund is the administrator of the pooled migration funding, and Chris McBarnes was invited to speak or be present and speak at the NGO panel in Jackson Hole last week. Wyoming continues to lead the way with migration research, and that takes a lot of leadership, and I just want to thank the director personally for that. Now to one of the more fun projects that was completed through partnerships. Recently, you guys have been hearing a lot of buzz about the Moose Fund and the beaver holding facility right here in town. You're going to have the opportunity to go and tour that facility right after my presentation. So I'm not going to include a lot of pictures or a lot of talk about it. Jerry Altermat's habitat research and his, it's just groundbreaking work that he's done as a habitat biologist here in Cody, brought to the forefront this ability to work two species together for the common good. And his partnership with Mary Rumsey and the Wildlife Fund's signature initiative, Wildlife for Tomorrow, and some other partners made this possible. So I'd like to introduce Mary Rumsey to say a few words about the Moose Fund. Thank you, Mary.
Director Nesvic, President Brokaw, members of the commission, I would just like to thank the Wildlife Fund for allowing me to set up the Moose Fund. And there's other species that could have funds set up for them, antelope, the Wyoming frog, and everything else, Wyoming toad, excuse me, but there's a lot of good things that can happen. The first time I worked with Jerry, it was a small donation, but it was a heap of paperwork. Giving money through the Wildlife Fund streamlines the process. There's been research studies in the Snowies that you have supported along with the Meeteetse Moose Project showing moose-like need damp areas to bed down. So beavers allow not only delicious food to be developed by them in the form of willows, but also very important bedding areas. Jerry Altermat is brilliant. He has worked his tail off to get this underway. And I would just like to, hopefully this goes to other regions and facility because it greatly facilitates moving families of beavers to create habitat. It's the most cost-effective way to create habitat for moose, elk, deer, fish, and waterfowl. So it's a win-win-win. We're taking the beavers from where they'd get killed, putting them where they're wanted, and saving a lot of money and doing a lot of good things. So thank you again. And Jerry will be talking to you. He's just brilliant. So you have a great person in Jerry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. As a home for all people who love wildlife, the Wildlife Fund is honored to be a part of that work. I lost my PowerPoint presentation. I had one slide left, but I can tell everybody about him without the slide. Last but not least, on October 30th, Wyoming lost a legend, and the Wildlife Fund lost an incredible partner in Maury Brown. I can pop it up here. He's getting it caught up. It's the very last slide, I think. There we go. Anyway, like I said, Wyoming lost a legend and we lost a great partner. Over the past 2 years, we've partnered with Maury to host the Maury Brown Kids Fishing Day at his Iron Mountain Ranch. With the help of the department and a host of other partners, we've reached over 500 kids and their parents and guardians through an incredible free fishing day at his ranch near Cheyenne, Wyoming. unbelievable thing, unbelievable event. If you had the opportunity to go there, I assure you that it was a life-changing situation, wasn't it? And it's just an unbelievable thing. The Wildlife Fund pledges to continue to carry on Maury's legacy and his commitment to the youth of Wyoming through our continued support for the Inspire a Kid program. Thank you, Maury Brown. In conclusion, thanks again to the director, the commission, and the department for having the foresight to see the value in creating the Wildlife Fund to provide needed support to projects across Wyoming. Chris McBarnes and I are both humbled to be working with you all to support Wyoming's greatest asset, her wildlife. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nate. Any questions for Mr. Brown of the fund? Go ahead, Commissioner Masterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nate, what is the projected opening date for the I-25 wildlife crossing? Do you know?
It's actually, it's functional right
Oh, okay.
now. Yeah,
All
it does not include a major overpass. It was just a bunch of underpasses and exclusionary fencing. And we went, we went up and toured it the other day. There's basically the final thing that they had to do, and this has been a couple of weeks ago, is build the rest of the dirt by the jump out structures. The jump out structures are built. They just had to put the dirt up next to them and then do reseeding. So there's already film and wildlife cameras that are, showing that it's being used currently. And just to, thank you, Commissioner Masterson and President Brokaw. But one of the most amazing things that I heard while I was up there providing or doing this film work for that project was one of the YDOT guys that's his name escapes me and I apologize, but that we interviewed, he said they were picking up about 40 big game carcasses per month on that stretch of highway. So if you ever wonder if those things work, there's a good example. So thank you guys. Any more questions?
Very good. Thank you, Nate.
All right, thanks.
I think we need to turn this over to Dan, Mr. President, and he will give us some direction on this little break and tour. For
Fantastic.
those that are interested, commissioners interested, where Jerry Altermat and Dan are going to, or maybe just Dan, I don't know, are going to give you a tour of the Beaver Holding Facility. So Dan, it's on you.
President Brokaw, Commissioners, Director Nesvik, it's not Dan. You want an expert on this, and that's Jerry Altermat. So we are excited. As you know, our donors are here. They're excited about it. You could see Mary's excitement this morning. And so we are excited to do this. We want to have everybody, we want to invite the commissioners, staff, and any of the public that would like to. Our Beaver facility is in the back 40, if you want to call it that. So process wise, I would recommend grabbing a coat. We did arrange for a nice day today. This is November, it should be snowing, but we wanted to make sure that you guys could see this. So nice day today, but it is a little breezy. You might want a jacket, and it is about 400 yards out to it. And so we'll go out this door here through the parking lot. Jerry will lead the way and he'll give a presentation out there, and then we'll come back into the room.
Very good. Let's go tour the facility and then we'll be back. Welcome back. That's pretty cool Beaver facility. Thank you, Cody, for sharing that tour with us. Now I'm gonna break on the agenda and I would call Chief Osterlin up to do a service award, please.
Morning, President Brokaw, Commissioners, Director Nesvik. This morning, I have another service award for you. It's my distinct pleasure to present for 20 years of service to Darren Ray. Darren, if you want to come up, please. So Darren is currently the Jackson Region Fisheries Supervisor. He started his career in 2000 in Jackson, and actually he grew up in Jackson. He was hired permanently in 2005. Then in 2007, he went to Pinedale as a fisheries biologist. He was there until 2021 when he was promoted to Jackson. So he spent a lot of time, obviously he likes Jackson. It cracks me up when he calls it Disneyland. Darren is a really high performer within the division, within the agency. He was instrumental and on the committee for the Master Angler program, which turned out to be a really popular program within the agency. Darren has also been really active in monitoring river segment use as far as fishing outfitters and guides. And a few years ago, well, maybe it was a couple years ago, he kind of led the charge on creating an administrative report on that use. And as you guys well know, it's become a pretty annual topic for the legislature. And we just went through a TRW session where it was a big issue. It's a very complex issue. And that administrative report that Darren worked on with his crew was very, very effective in conveying our message. He's an excellent writer. He is very good in public relations and has really good relationships in the Jackson, and he did in the Pinedale region as well. The meetings I've been to with him, whether it's Jackson Lake or other meetings, you just watch people come up to him because he's highly respected and they want to know what he's thinking and what his thoughts are and things. So Darren, thank you very much for your 20 years of service. And we'll look forward to another 20 more.
Thanks, Paul.
Congratulations, Darren. At some point, when we have a break, we'll get a picture with the director. Also, commissioners, at some point today, we need to get with Patrick and get updated commissioner pictures. So I'm not sure when that is going to happen. We're going to stick to our schedule as best we can for our presenters. But at some point, we need to secure that today as well.
I think if we do a mid-morning break, if that happens, then I think that'd be a great opportunity to quickly get a picture with Patrick, maybe in this corner where we've been doing these other pictures. And he'll get that updated. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Our next presentation is on in-stream flow, fish division. Del Lob, you're up. Good morning.
All right, thank you. See if I can get this figured out. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I am Del Lob and I'm the in-stream flow biologist for the fish division. I work out of Cheyenne. I'm work out of the water management unit, which is part of the aquatic habitat section. This presentation was prompted by a conversation I had with Commissioner Roberts back in the spring. We had a in-stream flow public hearing in Marbleton for a couple streams in the Upper Green River Basin, and the commissioner had a few questions for me, and we had a really good conversation. And at the end of that conversation, he suggested that I give a presentation on in-stream flows and in-stream flow water rights. So I'm going to share a brief overview of in-stream flow and water management that we do, and then get into a little bit of detail about in-stream flow water rights and the in-stream flow application process. And the timing for this presentation is good because this year we started a 4-year project to try to complete 11 to 15 studies over the next 4 years. All right. So its simplest definition, water that flows in a stream is an in-stream flow, but it's really the water that flows in the entire stream system, which includes the channel, the floodplain, the riparian area, even connections to groundwater. But as far as in-stream flow water rights, we're dealing with the water in the stream channel. And in-stream flow rights are really powerful tools for protecting stream flows and stream habitat for fisheries. But they're just one of the many tools that the department uses, not just fish division, but the entire department has tools for in-stream flow management and water management. So before I get into in-stream flow water rights, I want to briefly cover some of those in a very high level way, some of those other tools that the department uses. So the department staff is involved in many efforts to manage and protect in-stream flows and water levels. And we work through coordination, negotiation, technical guidance to advocate for reservoir levels as well as reservoir releases to benefit fish and wildlife and their habitats. And that's on existing reservoirs and proposed reservoirs. Examples of existing reservoirs. This Jackson Lake, the issue that this spring, the Bureau of Reclamation wanted to proposed and was planning to reduce flows to below levels than we've historically seen. And many folks in the department got involved in that issue. The other photo here is of a High Savory Reservoir in the Little Snake River Basin. And staff have worked and continue to work to ensure that reservoir levels and releases are as good as they can be for fish and wildlife. But we also get involved in environmental review of proposed projects. I didn't touch anything. Like West Fork Battle Reservoir, also near High Savory in the Little Snake River Basin. That's a proposed project to benefit a few irrigators in the Little Snake River Basin, and department staff across several divisions are working to ensure that if that gets built, that effects on fish and wildlife are mitigated. And there are many other ongoing examples and historical examples of the department's staff being involved in coordination, negotiation, and technical guidance on proposed and existing projects. We also get involved in collaboration and partnerships. One example is the Fremont Lake Water Users Group that works to make sure there's enough water for irrigation, public water supply, and in-stream flows. And another example is the Healthy Rivers Initiative, which is working towards getting more water flowing through the town of Lander in the Middle Fork Proposia River. We also have a water rights team that is made up of members from several divisions of the department. We work to manage and acquire and make recommendations for acquiring water rights. And a couple examples are the lake pictured here is Diamond Lake, northwest of Laramie. We have a 10-year agreement with Wheatland Irrigation District to purchase water to keep that lake full, and it's a really popular trout fishery. And another example is in 2021, land acquisition and acquisition of nearly half the water rights associated with Pump Sullivan Reservoir have really improved the future for waterfowl management and fisheries management in that reservoir. So that's just a 30,000-foot look at other water management besides in-stream flow water rights management. So now I'll focus on in-stream flow water rights in Wyoming. There was a 1986 law that gave Game and Fish the responsibility and opportunity to identify points on streams and the times of year when flows are most critical for fisheries, and to identify the minimum amount necessary. And that minimum amount necessary will be a theme throughout this presentation. The 1986 law did a lot of things. It allowed us the opportunity to keep some water in streams for fisheries, but just that minimum amount and seasonally. But it did not change the traditional senior junior water rights. An in-stream flow water right is junior to any pre-existing water rights, but it's senior to any water rights that are filed after the in-stream flow water right. And it's important to remember that an in-stream flow water right is a non-consumptive use, which means water is left in the stream and can flow downstream to other uses. But as you can see on this slide, that law does not permit abandonment or condemnation of existing water rights to get an in-stream flow right. But it does allow water rights to be sold or donated to the state for conversion to an in-stream flow right. But it does not allow for leasing or temporary donation of a water right for in-stream flow. There are 7 categories of water use identified in state statute, and in-stream flow is one of them. Prior to the 1986 law, water had to be diverted from either a stream, a lake, or a spring to be considered beneficial use. That 86 law made it designated a beneficial use of leaving water in the stream for fisheries purposes. So to be a little bit more specific, the in-stream flow law allows for providing the minimum flow necessary to establish, maintain, or improve fisheries, and no other person or entity can hold an in-stream flow water right besides the state of Wyoming. It's not the Game and Fish Commission, it's the state of Wyoming. And there's a really lengthy and rigorous process established for getting an in-stream flow water right. It's really the only water right that has this type of process. And it involves the Game and Fish Department, the Water Development Office and Water Development Commission, the State Engineer's Office, and the Board of Control. And it starts with Game and Fish selecting a stream, and it starts with our statewide State Wildlife Action Plan, our statewide habitat plan, which leads to the development of our water management unit plan. The most recent plan was done in 2011. It's on our website. I'm currently working on an update to that plan to prioritize our future study segments. But after we take a close look at different streams, we select streams for study, we do some reconnaissance, and then we conduct the study. And I'm going to give you we won't get into the details of how we collect the data, but we do measure various habitat variables, depth, velocity, substrate, cover, and other characteristics at 3 different flows during a summer at a study site. We use those measurements to calibrate mathematical models that are used to predict habitat quantity and quality at unmeasured flows. And then we take those calibrated models and identify the minimum flow levels that maintain habitat for all life stages of trout in different seasons. I know I hit the button. All right, and the reason we divide the water year up into 3 seasons is because that's the variability that you see on this graph from a mean daily flow as an example stream. There's low flow in the winter, the spring runoff, and the quick recession down to late summer flows. Fish species and other species evolved for that flow variability. And so we divide up the year into 3 seasons and develop flow recommendations for those seasons. So in the winter, we need to make sure pools are deep enough so they don't freeze, and fish will survive the winter. In the spring, we need higher flows so fish can get to their spawning areas, and those spawning areas will be wet. And the recession of the runoff is when the eggs will be hatching and the fry start rearing. So we need a little bit higher flow at that time. And then in late summer, we need certain levels of flow to provide for growth of young, juvenile, and adult fish. And that's where really a lot of the production occurs. And one flow will not meet all the needs year round. A flow that is good for spring spawning is probably going to be too high for good summer production because there won't be slow velocity habitats for fry, and the temperature will probably stay too cool for good growth. But I want to make sure that you understand that even though we target minimum flows, because that's what the law allows, flows higher than our seasonal minimums are needed in the long term to make sure that we have high flows that shape the valley, rejuvenate the riparian area, maintain the habitats that are created so channels don't get clogged with gravel. We need those spawning flows and passage flows and rearing and growth flows that we identify. But a lot of people think that you just need one flow that's low enough to keep the fish, that's high enough to keep the fish alive, and that's all you need. The problem with that is over time, the minimum flow, because that's legally protected, it can become the maximum flow, and you lose all those other functions provided by higher flows. I'll get the lag effect on this eventually. All right, so after we do those studies and have written the reports, we draft an in-stream flow water right application, and we submit it to the Water Development Office. The Water Development Office, on behalf of the Water Development Commission, submits that application to the State Engineer's Office, and that immediately triggers the Water Development Office to conduct a hydrology study that's funded by Game and Fish. And the purpose of that study is to determine, is there enough water, unappropriated water, in the system to meet the requested flows in the application? So in that study, they use some various methods to identify what would be the natural flow in this system. They look at any existing water rights that are within or upstream of that proposed in-stream flow segment, and they subtract any water rights from the natural flow, and that's the unappropriated flow available for our in-stream flow water right. After that, when SEO gets the application and they immediately issue a priority date, after they've got our biological study report and the hydrology study report, that's when they start thinking about holding a public hearing. And actually, in this room tomorrow, I think it's this room, in this building, there's a public hearing for 3 streams that are northwest of here in the Sunlight Basin. And I'll be giving a presentation at that. That hearing involves Game and Fish presenting our information, Water Development Office presenting the hydrology study, and it's also an opportunity for the public to provide any evidence of or claim of injury to existing water rights. After the public hearing, at some point, the State Engineer's Office will issue a record of decision, and the permitted flows may be less than the requested flows based on information provided in the various studies. After a permit is issued, then it goes to the Board of Control. At some point, they'll measure flows for a year or 2, sometimes 3, and they will adjudicate or finalize the water right. And the adjudicated flow levels might be even less than the permitted levels based on the flows that the Board of Control measures. Now, it only took me a few minutes to go through this process, but typically it takes 5 to 15 years from the time we start a study until the Board of Control issues an adjudication. And there are some out there that are over 20 years, and there had been some that were over 30 years. Best case, we can get it done in 3 or 4 years, but typically it's in that 5 to 15 year range. So you may be wondering, what types of streams do we get in-stream flow water rights on? Initially, after the 1986 law, the focus was on red ribbon trout streams and blue ribbon trout streams. But in the early 90s, about 1993, we shifted to looking at native cutthroat trout streams. There are 4 native cutthroat trout in the state. And got a little ahead of myself. And native cutthroat trout are species of greatest conservation need in our State Wildlife Action Plan because of habitat changes, water use, competition with and hybridization with non-native trout. Our native cutthroat trout have been relegated to small headwater streams, and they occupy a very small portion of their historical range. And we've started using in-stream flow water rights to protect those fisheries and try to keep them off the endangered species list. So between the best trout fishing streams and native cutthroat trout streams, currently we have 148 in-stream flow segments with over 600 stream miles. 123 of those have been permitted. 25 are still in the application stage. And that part of the stage they're in is they've gone through our recommendations. They've got a hydrology study completed, but they're waiting on a public hearing. And if you want more information about a specific segment or all the segments, on our website, there's an in-stream flow segment map, and you can click on one of those red upside down teardrops. And you get information about the rationale for the in-stream flow water right, where it's at. There can even get driving directions to it if you want to visit the site. And it's a good resource. So that's what we've done so far. And this year we started a 4-year project to try to really get at the current highest priority native cutthroat trout streams. And based on that water management unit plan I told you I'm working on, our priorities are genetically pure cutthroat trout populations that are the most important for conserving the native cutthroat and keeping them off the endangered species list. We're looking at streams where the populations, there's little or no risk for they get hybridized with non-native species. Of course, we want high quality stream habitat. We also have been using a product by the U.S. Forest Service called Climate Shield that predicts future flows and water temperatures in different stream segments. And so we're looking at segments that are predicted to be relatively stable in the future as far as stream flows and temperatures. We want to make sure that there's enough flow and cool enough water temperatures for trout in the future. And even if a segment doesn't meet all those requirements, if it's important to regional management, then that bumps up the priority of a potential in-stream flow segment. So this year we hired a contract biologist. We're going to have to hire another one. He just got a job in Montana, so we just announced that. But because we brought him on, we hadn't done any in-stream flow studies for a couple of years. This year, we were able to do studies on 3 Colorado River cutthroat trout streams, Klondike Creek, Rock Creek, and South Beaver Creek, northwest of Pinedale. And we have plans to do 3 to 4 Snake River cutthroat trout streams next year. And then after that, do 5 to 8 cutthroat trout streams to be determined in 2025 and 2026. So in the future, the streams we'll focus on are ones that we're doing work on to remove non-native species, or we're building fish barriers to keep non-natives out, or both or combined efforts of removal and construction of barriers. Streams where we've restored stream habitat or all of the above, and continue with that focus on cutthroat trout streams, but maybe not do so many in the future after we finish that 4-year project. And by some strange things going on. So by cutting back on that, maybe not doing any studies in a given year, maybe up to 2 per year, that's going to free me up to help out more with environmental review of proposed projects, any collaboration or partnerships the department's working on. And we've been doing a little bit of public awareness, but it would be helpful to let the public know about our broader water management efforts and our specific in-stream flow management efforts. So thank you for your consideration and your time. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Del. Questions, Commissioner Roberts?
Yeah, Mr. President, Del, thank you so much for that. I'm sure it cleaned.
You're welcome.
Sure appreciate it. And it was, I think, very helpful for the commission. One of the things, how does in-stream flow coincide with power generation? Or is that more of a federal thing, or is it something you're concerned with?
If it depends on, were you talking hydropower generation?
Yes.
If it's most hydropower operations, unless they're at a federal facility, if it's a private facility, they get a license from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And through that process, that's where the state and federal agencies have an opportunity to comment, have input on what studies are needed to be done to determine how flow should be managed in the reservoir and released from the reservoir. In-stream flow water rights could potentially be a part of that, but there's a lot of protection through the Federal Power Act and the state and the water quality certification that's part of that. And the water quality certification is done by the state.
Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
Okay. Moving on.
President Brokaw, members of the commission, and Director Nesvik, thank you. Next agenda item is a damage claim appeal from the Diamond H Ranch. This is damage claim number 23-192. What I will do is provide you a brief summary of the claim and the investigation by the department. And after that, I will introduce Corby McGinnis from the Diamond H Ranch, who's sitting behind me to my left. And Amanda McGinnis is also with her, and they will have some information to provide to you. And after they're done, Kemmerer Game Warden Alex Poncelet will come up and present the information in support of the department's decision. In addition to that, Regional Supervisor from the Green River Region, Todd Graham, is here as well to answer any questions that may come. And we also should have Rock Springs Game Warden Justin Dodd online, who participated in some of the investigation of this claim. So the gist of this claim is that the Diamond H Ranch submitted a claim in the total amount of $102,353 for damage to stored hay by elk and deer and moose. The department investigated that and determined that we would make a partial payment award of $49,766.50 for a difference of $52,586.50. So that's what is at stake here today before you. A couple things within your packet. You have a copy of the affidavit that was submitted by the claimant. That's the verified claim that the department looked at and used when they conducted the investigation and recommendation of the partial payment award. You also have that investigation report that's been provided from the department. You should have a damage claim summary that shows those differences in the valuation. And then finally, there's a damage claim appeal letter that was submitted by Mrs. McGinnis as her notification that she wished to be here today to appeal our recommended payment. Within that letter, hopefully you've all had a chance to review that. If you haven't, when we get done here, I'd suggest that you spend some time with that. There's good information in there. Ms. McGinnis did an excellent job of outlining and giving some historical background into their operation and their relationship with the department. In addition, it's apparent from that letter that relationship has been fractured as of late. And I just want to let Ms. McGinnis and the commission know that our folks in the region are committed to trying to repair that fractured relationship the best that we can moving forward. That's always our goal, and we'd like to get to that point again. I will let you know that what is at stake is the affidavit with the $102,000+ that was sent in. That is the verified claim. Within the appeal letter, there's additional requests for some compensation for things. That was not submitted as part of the verified claim. So what the department investigated was the affidavit and didn't consider any of the additional information and requests that was a part of that appeal. So I just want to make that clear to you to begin with. If you don't have any questions right now, I'll ask Ms. McGinnis to come forward and present her information. Very good.
On that opening.
My name's Corby McGinnis and I represent the Diamond H Ranch. This is my daughter-in-law, Amanda McGinnis. Basically, I think our letter pretty well outlined what happened and why we're here. We did purchase over 200 ton of hay to get through the winter. We did have reserves. We always have reserves so that we don't run short. And it was, I guess after going to the season setting meeting, I had left open, I hadn't planned on filing for damages. I was going to wait until after the season setting meeting to see if the Game and Fish were going to get on top of their elk numbers. When I got there, I got the sheet and they only went up 75 additional cow tags. They did extend the general season to the 14th of November. But there was 200 tags for private property. We sit in the DSA. There is by state statute with the state of Wyoming veterinary office, we can't allow elk onto our private property once we have cattle on those fields. These type 7s, 200 of them, quarter mile, within a quarter of a mile irrigated land. They're absolutely worthless where I live because I'm not going to have elk on my property because I jeopardize my ability to market my animals. And we are scheduled for a full bleed on Saturday. I know that my neighbors have not bled yet. So we're going to find out just where we're at. I don't think we allowed any commingling last winter with our cattle, so I don't think we're going to have any problems. But the last time that the Green River Basin had a hot cow, contracts were totally, cattle contracts were reneged on. All of the females that were supposed to be marketed in that area had to be spayed before they left the area. Right now, I can't market a pregnant cow unless she's bled before she leaves my ranch. So that ability to market at a decent time during the top of the market, it takes at least 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks to get a blood test back from the state veterinary's office. They are trying to improve that, but we worked really hard to try and get out of the DSA. We've bled our cattle on a regular basis. We have a herd plan. We've had a herd plan since the inception. We have a premise ID number since the inception of that. We've done everything that we can to get out of the DSA. And because there was an emergency feeding on Muddy Creek between LaBarge Creek and Fontenelle, that'll never happen.
My husband and I were actually in negotiations. We were in discussions with the state veterinary office and the brand board on how to further approach how to shrink the DSA back, because we did have such a small prevalence or an estimated prevalence of brucellosis that far south, because strictly based off the distance from a feed ground. And that's why, like she said, we assume at this point that's dead in the water because of that emergency feed ground being opened up. And it's hard because, yeah, we were looking at maybe even getting that line shrunk up to the Sublette Lincoln County line for that part of the area. And that would have affected quite a few of us ranchers, but we'll just have to see, I guess, now. Do you guys have any questions based off of what we submitted? I feel like we're going to need to be back up here at the end to clarify anything. I feel a little awkward going first. I don't quite know where to jump off at here.
I appreciate that. And yes, you'll get a chance to rebut for sure. I'll give you that opportunity. Is there anything else you'd like to include in your opening statements?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this point, are there questions from the commission?
Mr. President?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
And this is directed to Ms. McGinnis as well as the department, and you can answer from there. Is there any dispute about the amount of hay? Just the amount of hay?
Yeah, it seems to be, yes.
All right. Okay, maybe you can comment on that. As the president said, you'll certainly have the chance to comment. And I'm just, from everything you read, and your submissions were excellent. I'm trying to figure out and tease apart exactly where it was, and that wasn't clear to me. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, if you're fine at this time, I'd ask Camera Warden Alex Poncelet to come forward. And he has a PowerPoint to present.
Appropriate time, yes.
President Brokaw, Director Nesvik, and members of the commission. My name is Alex Poncelet. I'm the camera game warden. And I will be presenting on the report and the events of the damage claim for Miss Corby McGinnis in the Diamond H Ranch, and claim number 23192. Okay. Thank you. As an overview for Mrs. McGinnis' claim, on January 23rd, 2023, Corey McGinnis called Green River Regional Wildlife Supervisor Todd Graham. The conversation included concerns about her neighbors pushing elk onto her property over the weekend, and those elk getting into one of her stack yards the last 2 nights. It also included conversations about the overpopulation of elk, brucellosis concerns, and her disapproval of the emergency elk feeding. And she did not mention the intent to file for damages during this conversation. On January 23rd, same day, Warden Justin Dodd went to the Diamond H Ranch and spoke with Miss McGinnis about the damage she was having. She stated that some elk had broken into a stack yard and created a hole in the fence. Warden Dodd told her that he would get some fencing materials to help patch the hole, and also gave her his card and asked her to call if she continued to have any issues. On February 1st, 2023, Warden Dodd dropped off several hog panels with Miss McGinnis, and she said that those would help patch the hole in her stackyard fence, and she did not express the need for additional help or the desire to file a damage claim. On March 21st, 2023, Corby McGinnis told Todd Graham that she needed to file a damage claim for the hay that she had lost during the winter, and Todd Graham then called Warden Dodd to visit with Miss McGinnis to evaluate the damage. On March 29th, 2023, Warden Dodd visited with Amanda McGinnis to see the damage they intended to claim. From that meeting, Warden Dodd counted and estimated that approximately 100 bales had been damaged. He then told the McGinnises to continue to monitor elk damage until it ended, and the claim would be handled between Warden Dodd and myself, the incoming camera game warden. During this meeting and previous meetings, there was no mention of moose causing damage to stored hay. On May 3rd, Ms. McGinnis provided the following counts for elk to myself. On March 29th, they counted 50 elk. March 30th, they counted 10. On March 31st, they counted 100 elk. And on April 1st, they counted 85 elk. That same day, May 3rd, I visited with the ranch and determined that approximately an additional 100 bales had been damaged since the investigation on March 29th. On June 7th, Warden Poncelet myself stopped at the ranch and visited with Corby. I received receipts for hay purchased and dropped off the damage affidavit form, hunter access list, and the damage regulations. On June 21st, myself and Warden Dodd met with Corby McGinnis and Amanda McGinnis to discuss their damage claim affidavit. The claim calculations were done using the estimated number of bales consumed and damaged by elk and deer and the hay receipts that they provided. During that visit, The McGinnises did not agree with the damage award assessment and recommendation from both myself and Warden Dodd. They claimed that they could provide documentation from their baler showing the amount of hay that they had loaded into their stacks, the amount that they fed out, and the damaged leftovers. We asked for that information and we were told that it could be provided either that evening or the next day. After not receiving the documentation, I made several attempts to contact the McGinnises via phone and visiting the ranch. On June 24th, 2023, I visited the McGinnises in attempts to get the information from the baler, and I was told by the McGinnises that they had already submitted their claim. On June 27th, 2023, the department received a damage claim in the amount of $102,353 for damage starting January 17th and ending May 3rd, 2023. And then on July 18th, Wardens Dodd and myself received a screenshot of the information from the baler from Mrs. McGinnis. So information from the claim that Ms. McGinnis filed with the department. The number of elk that they claimed were approximately 400 to 550 animals. For mule deer, they claimed approximately 175 to 215 animals, and for moose, approximately 15. For stackyard materials that were damaged, they're claiming 6 12-foot posts, 5 rolls of 10-foot woven wire, 3 10-foot cross brace posts, 15 gripple jumbo packs of 10, 28 gripple packs of 10, 3+ boxes of 2-inch 9-gauge staples, and 2 more maker fence pliers. And for hay that they're claiming, total sandfoin hay that they're claiming was 39 tons at $295 a ton is $11,505. Total weed-free grass hay that they're claiming was $230 or 230 tons at $295 a ton for $67,850. And total alfalfa was 60 tons at $295 a ton for $17,700. Claimed hay loss was a total of $97,055, and the claimed fence loss for 2023 was $5,298.55. So the standard department assessment method for damage to stored hay, the landowner notifies the department personnel that stored hay is being damaged. The department personnel investigate the claim damage and determine whether there are opportunities or if it is appropriate to mitigate it. If mitigation is not possible, documentation of the damage occurs for the claim and report of damage. The department uses a more likely than not standard when determining damage. Department personnel and the landowner count the number of wildlife causing the damage to stored hay throughout the damage period. When hay is damaged and not consumed by trampling, being defecated or urinated on, bales or tons of hay are counted or estimated between the landowner and the investigating game warden. Department personnel then average the number of wildlife counted throughout the damage period. That number is then multiplied by the number of days in the damage period. The number of elk days is then multiplied by the average consumption rate for the species causing the damage, as found in the department's handbook of wildlife depredation techniques. And then the total pounds of hay consumed and damaged is then multiplied by the agreed upon price for hay. If the landowner cannot provide documentation for how much they purchase or sell their hay, current local market prices for hay can be used. And then the methods for damage to stackyard fence are very similar. The landowner notifies department personnel that stackyard fencing is being damaged. Department personnel investigate the claimed damage and determine if it is necessary or appropriate to mitigate it. If mitigation is not possible or appropriate for the situation, documentation of the damage occurs for later compensation. Landowners who meet the requirements outlined in Chapter 28 of the Commission regulations receive stackyard materials or to repair or replace damaged stackyards. These materials are issued based on the availability of the department to purchase them. Additionally, landowners can file a fence damage claim for damage sustained to fence material surrounding pastures. So for stackyard materials, Chapter 4 of the Handbook of Wildlife Depredation Techniques provide information on stackyard materials for preventing wildlife damages. Based on the recommendations in the handbook, the department provides the following materials for stackyards to landowners. The Diamond H Ranch falls within the designated surveillance area for brucellosis. So we go through APHIS to get funding for that. They give funding for specific materials for landowners within this area, trying to mitigate commingling with elk. These materials are approximately 600 linear feet of protection. It's 42 6-inch by 12-foot posts, 12 corner posts, 4 rolls of 47-inch by 330-foot woven wire, and 1 roll of barbed wire. So for big game damage, the commission is responsible for paying for damage caused by game birds, big or trophy game animals as authorized in Wyoming Statute 23-1901 and Wyoming Game and Fish Commission Chapter 28 regulation. Big game damage to hay is direct consumption and physical damage to bales, commonly seen as a portion of hay bales bitten or ripped off and the netting potentially damaged. For this particular claim, the damage calculations were based off of the estimated number of bales consumed and damaged by big game animals. Some bales were considered damaged by big game animals by urinating, defecating, and walking on them, although in some cases not the entirety of the bale may be considered a loss. These damaged bales are calculated in the damage award recommendation for Diamond H Ranch. And in this picture here, you can see an outline of the property that we're talking about, the Diamond H Ranch, and the 4 stackyards that were damaged. For the valuation, the damage here, stackyards 1 through 3, that was investigated by Warden Dodd. I was approximately 100 bales, and then stackyard number 4 was hit later on in the spring, and that was estimated another 100 bales. For the damage calculations, the sale price of stored hay claimed at $295 a ton was derived from receipts provided by Ms. McGinnis when purchasing hay and is recommended for the damage award. The weight of 1,687 pounds per bale is derived from the hay receipts that were provided by Ms. McGinnis. That's the hay receipts that they purchased hay for. A total of 200 bales damaged by consumption and trampling and other damages between 4 stackyards. It wants to move, maybe. Those 200 bales times 1687 for poundage equals 337,400 pounds of hay damaged. That weight divided by 2,000 to get the tonnage will equal 168.7 tons of hay damaged. And that 168.7 tons times 295 a ton. If this clicker will keep moving. For a total damage award for $49,766.50. There it is. And then noted on the side here, Ms. McGinnis in her affidavit was filing for $97,055. For the stackyard damage calculations, during the damage period, Ms. McGinnis requested replacements for damaged stackyard materials. She was informed that stackyard materials would be provided once they were available by the department. The Wyoming Game and Fish standard elk stackyard materials were delivered on September 6th of 2023. And that included 42 posts of 6-inch by 12-inch or 6-inch by 12-foot posts, 12 corner poles, 4 rolls of woven wire that are 47 inches tall by 330 feet, and 1 roll of barbed wire. And our total department approved stackyard damage was $0. Department recommended total payment for stored hay verified, $4,976.60 for deer damage, plus $44,789.90 for elk damage, plus $0 for fence damage, and that equals a total of $49,766.50. Just as a summary, to show the difference here, we got item number 1, stored hay damaged by elk and deer. Ms. McGinnis is claiming for $97,055, and the department's valuation was $49,766.50 for a difference of $47,288.50. Stackyard damage of $5,298.55. Department's valuation of 0, and then the difference there of $52,98.55. And total, McGinnis has filed for $102,353, and the department's valuation of $49,766.50 for a difference of $52,586.50. A little bit of background on that hunting season. This is the structure that was set up for the 2022 elk season in Hunt Area 102, which is where the Diamond H Ranch is located. Obviously, the month of September is held for our archery season, and then our regular season dates for our general elk is October 15th to the 24th, and then from the 25th through the 31st, general tag holders can also harvest a cow or antlerless elk during that time. We also have 200 type 6 tags, which is cow calf, from the 15th of October through the 30th of November. And then the type 7 tags, we have 100 of those, and that runs from December 15th to January 31st. Elk Hunt Area 102 season structure and license issuance allows for hunting opportunity for elk hunters and landowners to utilize. And I want to note that all reduced price cow calf elk licenses, the type 6 and 7s, were sold at the end of the 2022 season. There were no leftovers. Due to the winter that we had and the damages that were occurring, we had requested and had approved a Chapter 34 auxiliary hunt. And that took place on Fontenelle Creek. Hunters with unused type 6 or 7 licenses were called and given the opportunity to harvest an elk. Ms. McGinnis had agreed to participate in that auxiliary hunt. The hunt was held from February 8th through the 15th. And for that hunt, some statistics here. 20 hunters agreed to participate in the hunt. 11 hunters actually hunted, and they harvested 10 elk for a 91% success rate. And then 9 of the elk were harvested on the neighboring ranch to the west, and 1 was harvested on another ranch in Fontenelle Creek. And then the deer season structure for 2022, we don't have any doe fawn tags. So it's a general hunt area and Hunt Area 135. The month of September is held for archery. And then our regular season was ran from October 1st through the 11th, and we have a limitation of antlered mule deer 3 points or more on either antler or any whitetail deer. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions for Alex? Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. McGinnis, if you would like to come up and if you,
Mr. Dodd's available for any questions.
However you'd like
If
this
you'd
to
like
flow,
have any
sure.
questions of him, we can sure have him join in.
I just didn't know if you wanted to add something to that before we started.
well, to this point, I do have a question and I
Okay.
missed it. So at this point, why is there such a difference between the department's estimation of hay loss and your number of hay loss?
I would like to ask that right now. Did you ever go with me when I asked you to show you the damage after Mr. Dodd had been there? To go to see those stackyards? This is the difference.
Okay.
Because
we'll
the
get there.
estimation of 100 bales lost by Warden Dodd on March 29th, when he appeared, does not include anything that happened after March 29th until the close of our loss in May. And the bombardment continued despite everything we tried to do moving forward. And that's, I said, I'm not saying that that, you know, something, I don't know how to say that something should have happened differently, but when I tried to say, hey, I can go show you, but in Alex's defense, or Warden Poncelet's defense, he didn't have a reference because he wasn't there to see the beginning. So even if he had went and looked, I don't know if he could have come up with the number that we have. I mean, like I said, he didn't see it from the beginning, so how could he compare it to the end, even if he had gone and looked? But and then Mr. Dodd or Warden Dodd hadn't come back either, so he didn't have a reference point. It was just the way things worked with incoming and outgoing and how that all worked is my assumption on how we got such differences. We knew how much went in those stackyards. Like I said, I've given some pictures on how we can calculate that, the bales, the tonnages, how much we have in each of our stackyards. And dates. I don't know why dates keep getting moved around and numbers. I mean, even in the PowerPoint, it kept saying miscalculation. There's a little asterisk there. 55 cents difference. I wouldn't call that a miscalculation. That's a rounding to a whole number because we claimed 102,353, not 102,353 and 55 cents. So and then gosh, where to start? Like I said, stackyards 1 through 3 were, I took Warden Dodd to visit those on March 29th. He had estimated 100 bales. At that point in time, he informed me that we could not claim damages on hay that had been defecated on or otherwise ruined or destroyed by elk. We could only claim damages on what had been consumed. So I could kind of see the 100 bales at that time. That made sense to me. But that doesn't mean that the consumption ceased on that day. And that's what we kept I kept trying to bring up whenever whenever one or both of the investigators came for a visit. They also told us that we had to count, you know, throughout the damage period, but we kept telling them those numbers, those 100 head, those 10 head, that was strictly at, if we could bring up the picture of the stackyard, I was strictly at the one stackyard that we have visibility from her house.
Yeah, it's over a mile.
That wasn't the other 3 stackyards. We kept bringing that up, but it kept getting ignored. And that's where this breach in our relationship, it just, I mean, it started as a tiny crevice and it just keeps getting wider because we're not, it doesn't seem like we're trying to bring it together here. It seems like we're trying to force it even further apart. Another correction in the presentation was only Mr. Poncelet had been present when he dropped off the affidavit. That was not dropped off on the 21st when him and Mr. Dodd both were present. And on that date, we were instructed what we could claim. We were told what the affidavit had to say. We were told what date we were supposed to put on for when we notified Mr. Graham. And I was told how I needed to fill it out. And that is very misleading when it's coming from a position of authority.
And that's
Because-
when we were asked also to prove how much hay we put up every year.
Well, when Mr. Dodd and Mr. Poncelet were both present on the 21st was when we were told, well, we can change our math if you can prove it. And I misspoke when I thought that I could get that information to him as quickly as possible. I'd never promised the next day or two, but I did tell him that I would get it to him as quickly as possible. However, with dead batteries and flat tires and things like that, it took longer because I assumed I could just recall the information from the tractor side. I actually had to hook the baler up to the tractor. That's my husband's department. So I had misspoke. And when Mr. Poncelet visited a week or two later, I made sure that I let him know that that was the delay. I was trying to get all this in.
However, they could have used those numbers because you did not receive the affidavit from the Game and Fish office in Green River until the 31st of July. And they had that information on the 18th.
From their verification side of it. And I didn't calculate bales until we were completely finished with the feeding season. But when they kept asking for estimates, I estimated between 400 and 550 head of elk, 175 and 215 head of deer. Those were our estimates based on what my husband and I were trying to haze away. The reason we never claimed any damage for moose was because it was strictly damage to the stack yards. They helped tear them down, but we were able to haze them and finally get them to quit coming back. I kept asking for, well, how do you say that we didn't have this many if I've got this much hay loss? It all added up. Once I finally had to go, I realized that Wyoming and Idaho are not the same, but you guys are similar in a lot of ways. So I reached out to a friend at the Idaho Game and Fish Department and said, what numbers do you use for elk and deer consumption? And that's where the numbers originally came from that we had shown Mr. Poncelet and Mr. Dodd when they came and sat at our kitchen table to discuss the math that they were going to present, which is the math that they've still presented. It's the math that is going to haunt us forever, I'm assuming at this point. And all those numbers came within reason to my estimates. So I felt like that just gave us one more, proof that, okay, everything's adding up. Then to further back that up, once we were finished and we put cows out to range and out to private pasture in June, I went back and I calculated our total hay for the year, plus the 202 tons we had to purchase to just inch us by, and then calculate our 2% consumption based off of our herd numbers. Then I knew exactly how much hay had been used or lost or eaten or otherwise destroyed because there was no hay left. So I had a starting point, I had an ending point, and I had where they went. It either went to my cows or it went to the elk and the deer. So and then I said, that's where we got the other numbers. And that's why our request changed, because again, the 329 tons was under our understanding that it could strictly be what was consumed. We could not, as we had been told, claim damages to broken bales that had been trampled, bales that could no longer be picked up. And I've showed you some pictures. I mean, dead deer and elk laying on top of it. I mean, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we literally had to scrape down through the dirt trying to keep brucellosis, to keep botulism from hopefully hosting, because we still have to put those bales back in those stack yards now. That's where it is now. We're having to, we couldn't just go build a new stack yard somewhere else. So we're trying to protect ourselves from botulism moving forward from all those dead carcasses that we had to pick up and try to move out. We were never told that fence could be calculated at a later compensation. Yeah, that would have been good. That would have been good to know. And then I would also like to point out that the 9 elk harvested on the neighbor's ranch during the late season, that doesn't surprise me. I'm pretty sure Mr. Poncelet could back me up. When the very first time he came and visited our ranch, I pointed out 3 elk commingling with our neighbor's cattle from our vantage point. And I asked him then to go remove them because, again, we're in the DSA, commingling cannot be allowed. And he laughed at me. He said he was not going to go shoot those elk. And I mean, they were obviously, they weren't a big group. It wasn't something to haze or move. These elk are too smart. When they're off by themselves, they just go lay down and they don't move as a group. We've got to, but that's the problem is nobody could harvest any off of our place because we border BLM on both sides. And my husband worked his hiney off trying to make sure he put over 900 miles on a snow machine. Our ranch isn't 3 miles of a reach for that. That's it. To put 900 miles on a snow machine, hazing elk off of our property to make sure that we didn't have any commingling. I mean, that's just huge. That's tons of miles every day.
I want to question on the numbers. They gave us the hunting season, what their permits were and stuff. But when I went to the season setting meeting in March, our biologist had a bunch of sportsmen around him and they were all talking and visiting and stuff. And he bragged that he counted 4,500 head of elk from the road. Now I added 20% to that and we had 5,400 head of elk. Our herd objective is 3,100. Spring came. Our elk herd is one of the most prolific. We don't have any disease in them. Normally, in the past, they figured 60 to 70% recruitment. That would mean we had 3,240 head added to that. Going into this fall during the hunting season, we had 8,640 head of elk. And that's just an estimate because no one has counted that herd since 2020. So no one in the office in Green River can give you an accurate count on that herd, but I can guarantee you are pushing 9,000 head. And you're going to sit here and tell me that those permits that were issued this year, we're going to reduce it. The last time they counted 5,000 head in the West Green River herd unit, they started the elk season the 1st of October. It was any elk until the end of October, and they allowed out-of-state hunters that drew an elk tag to acquire an additional cow tag during the general season. And they allowed regular Wyoming hunters to have an additional cow tag during the general season. We didn't get a harvest this year, guaranteed. So I don't know how many elk we're going to have.
Okay, let's any questions from the commission at this time?
Yes, Mr. President, I've got one question. Kirby, on how many elk do you usually have in a winter besides last winter on your?
We don't have any problem with elk. That last year, on the 1st of November, we trailed out of our upper place, which is a 30-mile trail. We have to come out of Fontenelle Basin, trail over the top of Fort Hill, and down through Dry Hollow to the home place at the bottom of Fontenelle Creek. There was 1,000 head of elk by the 1st of November on Fort Hill. And that's not an exaggeration. My son called up his buddy and told him, "You still have your additional cow tag?" And he said, "Yeah." And he says, "Come on up." He said, "I'll get you an elk." And he took him up there and it was 30 below. The weather was lousy. We had snow everywhere and no hunters out on the mountain. And that kid said, I didn't know there was that many elk in the country. They knew in advance that they were going to have problems and they didn't do anything about it. We had to wait until January for them to open the season back up and say, anybody that had that additional late cow tag, go fill it.
But it made it hard when we're so close to BLM. I mean, the
But
width
the
of our
elk that-
property isn't that wide. So once they're off our property, they couldn't get them because the corridor was closed.
So typically during the hunting season, you don't have elk on your,
Not where we receive damage. We do not see any elk during.
Because
hunting season.
we're
too
in what
low.
they call the banana belt. We have one of the best winter ranges in the state of Wyoming. We winter elk, deer, antelope, moose. My allotment, the South Labarge Common, is 80% core sage grouse. It is a great place to have wildlife in the wintertime. We get very little snow and the winter was not that bad. January rolled around and yes, the neighbors up the creek were having problems and they started to fracture those herds. The herds, normally they come down, they cross over to Slate Creek across us. They either cross up above my house or down below, about in the middle of the ranch between the Fontenelle Reservoir and my place. We let them get into herds of about 500 head. And Michael can easily move them across the ranch and then they just go on their way. And you can see it. But last year they were hitting the neighbors up high and they started to fracture those herds into smaller and smaller units. And you lose your lead cows that normally know where to go. We have great elk. In the past, our old biologists and that, Ron Lockwood, the year that he counted 5,000 head, we had 500 head wintering on the ridges to the north of us and 500 head wintering on the ridges to the south of us. And Ron said it was amazing because those elk could literally see us down in the bottom feeding our cows, but they never bothered to come in. The snow last year didn't get that bad. It wasn't crusty. It didn't freeze. Our temperatures were flat. The only 30 below weather we had was in November, first part of December. Snow hit. Yes, we had snow, but the deer were even doing all right till the elk showed up. The deer were pawing, open up areas on the ridges and stuff. They looked great. Even Justin Dodd made the comment, deer are looking really good. Until the elk came in. The elk ran those deer off of those places where they opened up. They ran the antelope off of what they opened up. And that's when you started losing your deer and your elk and your antelope. Your elk populations are what are devastating your deer populations. And then when it's warmed up, there was green grass underneath that snow. And then you got that green grass hit those deer and mule deer and the antelope that were left, and it took them out because it was too lush for them. But we didn't see the elk carcasses. We didn't see dead elk because you fed them over on Muddy and you fed them in Cokeville.
let's go there. So how far was the emergency feeding from you?
As the crow flies, about 5 miles.
Or a little less. Yeah.
And where is the boundary of the DSA?
The
From you?
DSA, it goes all the way down to the Hams Fork.
So it's south of you.
Yes. It used to only be on Fontenelle, but then they extended it down to Hams Fork.
The other question I have, and then I'll open it up to the commission, of the fencing material damaged, was that originally department provided material or was that ranch purchased material?
Both, because we made the stack yards bigger than what the Game and Fish gave us.
Had provided,
Mhm.
okay. Any other questions from the commission at this point?
Mr. President,
Go ahead,
So-
Mr. Commissioner Bell.
Yeah, can you help me understand? So, on March 29th, there was an estimation of 100 bales that were from stack yards 1, 2, and 3. And then on May 3rd, stack yard 4, another 100 bales. Is that, and maybe this is a question for Alex, but nothing in between that? I mean,
That was just when the estimations were made. Like I said, the damage kept coming, the damage. Because once they broke into that first stack yard, I said, if we could bring up the map, it'd be easier. But once they broke into that first stack yard, that stack yard never got a reprieve. My husband and I were down there daily trying to put it together, but they had broke off 6 different posts, two different corners, 4 different 6 to 8 inch diameter posts. Like the elk would just sit there, and I mean, they killed some of themselves. They would just pound that post until it broke off. And then once it was broke, because of it being frozen ground, we couldn't put anything in the ground. So we just had to do the best we could to try to secure it up. And then every night, and again, that stackyard's the one that only got hit at nighttime hours. And they would just come and just knock it over. And I don't know if, it was just a few that knocked it over and then everybody followed, or if everybody hit it at one. I don't know. I just know that by morning, I mean, another 10, 20, 30 bales was gone. I mean, it was just massive amounts of hay every day would just be obliterated. And so, and like he said, some of it would be, only eaten down a little bit, but I mean, the elk were literally getting on top of the bales to eat. And that's the one picture where the one is flipped over. It got wedged between bales and suffocated. We didn't even know it was there until it finally got ate back to that point that it exposed. It started exposing some dead elk that had fallen in between the bales from trying to walk on top of them. So, I mean, they were getting attacked from both ends, the sides and the top of the stack yard.
And once those stack yards the wire gets messed up, we literally had to cut elk out of the wire.
Yeah.
Because they were getting hung up
They
in it
just
and
get
dying.
tangled.
But it's almost impossible to keep them out once they've broken into.
And yeah, so now we're rebuilding them. So
And
that
I
we
did.
don't have this going forward.
And the thing is, when I first called Todd at the office, I called him because our snow machine broke down and the elk were hammering us and we couldn't control them anymore. And Todd pretty much told me he didn't have anybody to send our way and that we were on our own. And I watched from that whole weekend elk come in and demolish that stack yard. And I called Monday morning up at Pinedale, Rocky Mountain Sports. And I told Josh Tatro, I said, I need a snow machine. He says, I've got one. He says, I got it Saturday. I says, Michael will be out to pick it up. And he went up and picked it up. And that's the one that had 900 miles on it.
We don't even have a calculation for the one that broke down because we dropped it off, but there was more miles that were done before then. But like I said, when we still had a snow machine, he could manage it. I mean, he used to move elk with Warden Baird. I mean, those two guys, between Warden Baird and my husband, they could take all day. That was something my husband taught him, was that you can't move elk fast. You got to keep them in a group. You got to, give them a nudge and let them be for a little bit, but they could always move them through whenever we've had problems in the past. Even the last big snow year we had a few years back. We had
2017.
Yeah, 2017, we had like 600 head of elk show up on the face on the south side of our property. And between the two on snow machines, they were able to push them across, get them out onto the Exxon pipeline, get them out on top of that, where they've reseeded that to Basin Wild Ryan. And we don't have the problems. Last year, they just wouldn't leave because, they just kept breaking apart.
And I truly
I'm assuming
believe
it's a learned behavior.
it definitely was a learned behavior, but I do believe by not trying to move those elk in a timely fashion and fracturing those big herds into smaller ones, I think that's when you start having your problems.
There's without doubt, based on your pictures, you had damage. And I have now found your calculations on your hay losses. And so I punched some numbers and It's exactly how I figure mine, 2%.
Right.
So I found that now. Any questions from the commission at this time? Okay, I have some questions for the department, so if you ladies would like to take a rest, you'll have an opportunity to come back.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's just one more thing I want
Well,
to
why
bring
don't
up,
you
but
say it
it's
right
kind of.
there? Go ahead.
Okay, it was just, I mean, it's a little separate from right now, but moving forward, if this were to happen again, the current regulations stipulate that we have to allow, what's the wording on it? An appropriate number of hunters.
Yeah.
For 500 head of elk, if I'm not mistaken, that would be 300 hunters on 1,800 acres of private property.
Yeah,
We don't have that many tags
Yeah,
for
there's
us to have that share.
certainly
So-
leniency, correct me if I'm wrong, Director, that goes into account on time of year that you are experiencing damage and how many elk are on specific your property, not necessarily the whole hunt herd unit. And so there's flexibility on that because we've run into that before. You just can't achieve that.
Right. I mean, we're definitely very friendly to hunters, but yeah, I was like, I don't know how we would ever even begin to try to get even 100 hunters. I mean, because I mean, we got so much, and there's 110,000 acres behind me that they can get to without asking to come through my property. They can go around. And so I just have no way of tracking that. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, department, whoever would like to, let's talk about the elk herd in this area. I'm not familiar with this elk herd. I don't know the herd objective. I don't know the hunting pressure. I don't know the tags issued. I don't know the characteristics to this elk herd. So,
Mr. President, if you'd like to discuss the management and herd size and metrics and things, I'll have Regional Supervisor Todd Graham address that for you.
Perfect. Little background on this herd.
Sure. Good morning, President Brokaw, members of the commission, Director Nesvik. Yeah, so Corby's correct. 3,100 is our current objective for this elk herd. We will reevaluate that by schedule in 2028, I believe. So we'll try to do that every 5 years. And so, obviously you all are well versed in public opinion versus landowner opinion at times on numbers of elk. And we try to listen to both sides. So we did in 2020 was our last time. Corby's correct there. There was I think 4,700 thereabouts, estimate from that flight. And so we try to fly every 3 years and get a count. Unfortunately, we don't always have the money. We're trying to get trend counts done in the Sierra Madre herd that desperately need it, and get siteability done on deer and those sort of things. So
we know you're spread pretty thin.
yeah. So we estimate currently that population at 3,700 elk. But I don't disagree with Corby. It'd be really nice to get a better count again. So we will try to do that as soon as we can. So we did, after last winter, you saw the 2022 seasons. This year we adjusted those. We saw that, the elk were very visible, and we were over objective, 3,700's over objective. So we added 2 more weeks to the general season, just closed yesterday. Fortunately, or fortunately, I guess, if you're an animal, this kind of weather is very, very beneficial, but it doesn't promote elk harvest. So I agree with Corby again, probably very little harvest, even though we tried to extend that season. And we did add some more type 6s and type 7s. And those in area 102 are not limited as far as a quarter mile to irrigated land. Those are good for the whole area. The type 7s don't start till December 15th. But the type 6s run through October, or the whole season, October and November. So.
Okay, I have another question, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So I'll ask you about your region your supplies, your stack yard supplies in my region, we're so far behind. How are you in the Green River region for stack supplies, replacing damaged supplies? And is that a problem? Do you have a problem with getting the haystacks fenced again, repaired?
Yeah, again, because of, budgets, we can only purchase so many posts, so many rolls of net wire and barbed wire. So, and it's kind of interesting. We have some stack yards on the ground in the region that haven't been built yet. Even though they were delivered, but we do have a lot of landowners that work with us and get those, put up. We did have some trouble last year getting supplies out to people in a timely manner before the ground froze. Obviously, you try to do that. So, but we have the region's budget for stack yard materials, and then in the DSA, we get some APHIS money to purchase damaged supplies or materials as well. And those are purchased out of the Pinedale Regional Office, and those we were able to get one of those stack yards for the McGinnis's, and I think 2 more. Is that right, in Fontenelle Creek or?
Yes, 2 more.
See other landowners there. So, but could we always use more? Yes, probably, but again, it's up to the landowners to build them, and
Yeah.
so.
I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that if we buy the 2022 hay pile, we're not going to be buying the 2023 hay pile. So we need to get the fences fixed. I just want to make sure that that opportunity has been provided to you.
They're done.
Excellent. Okay, any other questions for the department from the commission at this point?
Mr. President.
Go ahead, Commissioner Lywood.
I notice on I'm from eastern Wyoming, so I don't have too much of this problem type happening. But it says everything that I see on it that you're using 47-inch wire. Now, do you stack that, or is 47 inches won't stop an elk?
Correct. You have to.
Yep. So you stack it. So you're getting 8 foot of fencing.
Well,
Now, the pictures that I
not
saw, the
quite.
haystacks didn't look like there was more than about 4 foot.
It was just that much snow built up around it. And that was another problem. That was why we asked if maybe we could
Packed up.
15-foot posts.
I
Because
see.
it's like, we've got to go 3 high. Like we
Okay.
need to go 3 layers of 4 feet high, not just 2. It seemed like for years like last year, because
Okay.
yeah, there was a spot in one stack yard, the deer could just jump over an 8-foot fence.
Right.
And it's like,
Okay.
once the moose had pulled it down, which I mean, it wasn't 8 feet exactly. Once the moose had pulled it down, then the deer could, it was like 6 feet, but with the snow, they weren't having to jump 6 feet.
That answered my question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Masterson.
Mr. President, thank you, and indulge me because I feel like a real dunce, and I'm sorry, I just need to understand this. And what I'm talking about is the amount of hay. Okay? It's obviously really important that I get it, and so just bear with me. Department says 200 bales. You're aware of that. So, and you say 329. Fair enough. Your 329, it looks like it's based on calculations based on the number of elk. Do I read that right?
The
Help me.
329, I originally counted
Right.
approximately 329 bales. Sorry.
Okay. No, you're fine.
When I went to each of the stack yards and I said, okay, there's a quarter of this whole row missing.
Okay.
Times 4 makes 1 bale, and there's this many from the back of that one and this many of that one. And so I'd estimated that had been damaged. But then, like I said, I was told I couldn't include stuff that hadn't been eaten. So I needed to bring that back down. But by the time we filed in May, 329 bales had been consumed. And so that number didn't change. Then if we added in the damaged bales, that's where that extra 70 tons comes from. That's what was still left damaged after that.
Help
Okay.
me.
And I'm sorry.
No, you keep talking. I came up with the 329 consumed on your numbers. I didn't see the additional 70 tons, so I need to find that.
That was just the calculation from what was left over. So from when we put up if you look at the little Excel spreadsheet, I think it's like the very last page, there it shows 1,200 tons plus 202 tons purchased, which is 1,400 tons on our property, 497, I can't remember, cows, plus so many yearlings.
Yep. I remember seeing those numbers.
That's how we were able to come up with the damaged, because they weren't whole bales anymore. So I couldn't, when it was all said and done, I couldn't go back out and be like, okay, there's still these many damaged bales. And so,
I understand. And the Excel spreadsheet you're referring to, that's in your appeal
Yeah.
letter?
yes, that was in
Okay,
the appeal
because
letter. Yeah.
what I'm sorry, Mr. President, if I
You're fine.
derailed you.
No,
Um,
you're fine.
What I was looking at was your original affidavit.
Mhm.
And that's where what I see is, 39 tons of deer damage, a number of head of deer at such and such pounds per day time 105 days.
Right.
That's why I asked if it was based on a count of number of deer, because it looks that way to
Yeah,
me.
no, I had estimated deer.
That's
And I
fine.
had
That's fine.
estimated bales. And then, like I said, then I reached out to some friends at Fish and Game and was like, what's the AUMs? And that's what they gave me. They in Idaho, they use AUMs, not pounds. And so then I calculated it and it matched. And so I was like, or close enough. And I was like, well, then that gave me the confidence that I wasn't, just throwing out this exorbitant number to you guys. It was
right.
This many elk could eat this many bales of hay that I'm pretty sure I've counted missing, and this many deer could do the same.
Okay,
And
well, then
yeah.
I don't feel like, too much of a dunce then, because that's where I was getting that number, and that's why I was thinking and now I understand how you got that.
Yeah, I was just trying to use it to support my estimates. And when it came so close, I was like, I felt like I had done my due diligence to support my
I
findings.
understand, but we look at what you submitted, and when I, read it the other day, I was, I hope you can understand why I said, department says this, 329 is being calculated based on,
Right.
and I don't understand, so.
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
I was doing,
Thank you.
tons, so yeah.
Okay.
Made a big difference.
But you also, you believe as well that 329 is stuff you actually verified is lost, plus the 70.
Yes, yeah. Like I
Okay.
said, once the season was over, I was able to
Right.
calculate it, and it all matched up to further confirm
Right.
for my thinking, because that's 329 tons, not 329 bales, because
Right.
that was something else that I tried to bring up when Mr. Dodd and Mr. Poncelet came to our house the last time together, was that I kind of scribbled all over their math because I was trying to show them that you can't compare. Just because the bales we bought weighed 1,600 pounds, you couldn't assume that the bales I had in my stack yard weighed 1,600 pounds. And so I was trying to, explain to them that, I included it in there that I have proof that our second cut alfalfa weighed almost 2,000 pounds a bale. That makes a big difference when you start trying to say, and that's why we just always speak in tonnage, because we feed in tonnage. We know what our average bale weight is, and we consider that when you feed it out, but we feed it so many tons a day, not so many bales a day.
Mr. President,
Commissioner
go ahead.
Roberts.
I'm just gonna say it as a general statement, and I've been trying to, you can go ahead and be seated just for a second, I think. But, and I'd driven up there a couple times, and we had elk everywhere. And all up through the valleys. But I can assure you, the commission, I want the commission to know just how hard this department worked their butts off up in all of that area. I was in contact with Supervisor Graham daily. Daily, he was trying to resources from around the state and biologists and everybody that he could possibly get to this to help out in this valley, in the Fontanelle and the Muddy and over towards Cokeville and stuff. I can say that the wardens and Alex, they literally worked themselves to death in that area through the whole winter. I don't even know if they even got a day off anywhere in between. And I know that, and we're dealing with the ranchers and the family. They're salt of the earth, good ranchers, good folks on this, and for our area. And so the commission, I think it's a matter of, and I've always say, there can be two rights. I mean, the wardens are doing what the law mandated them to do. This is where they're setting what we told them. This is how you can calculate. And then you have a nice, honest family that's salt of the earth, that ranches, that's always been pillars of the community everywhere they go. So I really don't think that, I think it was just a perfect storm which we got into, because I think that we need help. It needed help. It was just Southwest Wyoming. We just got crushed with things we just weren't accustomed to. And we can argue we have too many elk. And then on the other thing is that the department, they probably got 50,000 calls saying, why aren't you feeding the elk here? You need to feed them there. So we responded back and forth and back and forth. And I don't want to go on a thing, but I don't want anybody, and I don't want anybody in the commission to even think that Supervisor Graham wasn't on top of this as much as humanly possible as what they do. And I think McGinnis's have exactly a great point. They're in the right also. And I appreciate the department and what you did and all the way through, and Supervisor, and all of your personnel. And it was a problem. It was a problem. And I hope that somehow that as a commission, we see it in our wisdom to fix it a little bit, and hopefully we don't run into it this year again. So anyway, I just wanted to say that to everybody in my thoughts. I was very familiar with what was going on through the whole winter there. And so I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Commissioner Roberts. That was well said. Any other questions from the commission?
Mr. President, I just have one question. Maybe this is for Alex, and I'm looking through the timeline. And so on March 29th, it's kind of a similar question I asked earlier. There was stacks 1, 2, and 3. I think we talked about having 100 bales damaged. And then a month later, over a month later, in May 3rd, there was approximately 100 additional bales damaged. And that was just in stack yard 4, or was that cumulative that you found it?
So that was more so from Stackyard 4. Having conversations with Amanda McGinnis, they had estimated that it was a total loss out of that stackyard. And I can't recall off the top of my head exactly what tonnage she had mentioned was in there. And then using the photographs that Warden Dodd had taken of the other stackyards earlier, I had estimated approximately 100 bales were damaged, both from feeding and then obviously being defecated and stuff.
What I'm trying, I guess, I'm in my mind trying to figure out, and so that was between March 29th, so the whole month of April, there isn't anything we didn't reevaluate, like 1, 2, and 3.
There was no warden in the Kemmer Game Warden District. I started April 1st. And May 3rd was the first time that I had, or I think it was it the 1st or the 3rd that I was out there the first time? I think it was the 3rd. Yeah. I believe that was the first time that I had been out to the Diamond H Ranch to introduce myself to the McGinnises, was on that date.
Okay. No, I appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You walked into a hornet's nest. I mean, you had a problem. I have never seen, we have elk damage in our area on my ranch, and they get around the edge and they eat. I've never seen them pile on and die inside the bales because there's so many of them. That's epic. That's a great photo. Without any more questions from the commission, I would like the director to remind us of our authority and our restrictions and where we're at right now.
So I think Commissioner Roberts, thank you, Mr. President. I think Commissioner Roberts did a good job of framing kind of both sides of this problem that we had last year. And one of the reasons that the damage regulation is constructed in the way that it is because there are times, and this commission's seen this before, where department goes out and does their job, but there are other mitigating circumstances, things that are not contemplated in the regulation, and reasons why the commission needs to further consider a damage claim. I think this is one of those cases. I think that the commission needs to understand the way that the regulation is constructed. You have broad latitude, and you can, it's not something that hasn't happened in the past where the commission's considered other additional information, considered your own regulation, acknowledged the fact that the department followed the regulation, but have made a different decision. I just want you to know you have that latitude and flexibility in the regulation that is currently on the books.
Thanks, Director. Anything left from our claimant or our department? Anything you'd like to add?
President Brokaw, the department doesn't have anything further.
Okay. Ladies, are you okay? Let's work the claim, Commission. What's the pleasure of the commission? You start it. We'll see how it flies.
I haven't been shy since I've been here, so I guess I might as well
You
get
both
after.
get
Thanks,
bold.
Mr. President. So, we have an elk problem. I think we know that. We had a really tough winter. I think Commissioner Roberts really laid out a lot of the extenuating circumstances that were happening in this last year. Add on top of that, a change in personnel, and ongoing damage that was happening probably every single night. I think we're going to continue to work on these damage claims and how to handle it. As you guys heard yesterday, this is probably the suckiest part of the job from everybody's perspective, landowners, wardens, ours. But we have animals that are doing damage here, and there's just no question about it. I think the pictures are there. I'm having a little bit of not understanding. We dropped off some materials. There's still a material claim, so I don't know how to do that, but I'm open to paying for the animals that we fed, and I feel like I could reimburse that amount of what I feel like our animals in the state probably ate or damaged. So
Thanks, Commissioner Belt. Just quick on the fencing, because the department had provided some materials and the ranch had provided some materials. And so without being able to designate whose post was broken, I feel there's warrant in fence damages as well. Anything you guys like to add?
Mr. President, I think they've been very passionate about, you can tell just by the voices that they're deeply concerned about what's gone out there. I'm not in any way condoning full payment for what they're asking for, but I do think we owe them more than what we're offering.
Thank you, Commissioner Jolovich. I think in this situation, I think it does warrant full payment, and I would entertain a motion to that effect.
Mr. President, I'll make that motion.
It's been moved by Commissioner Ladwig to pay the McGinnis Ranch for their damage claim of $102,353. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Is there a second to that motion? Second by Commissioner Lundvall. Any further discussion on the motion?
Yes, Mr. President. So that include the fence posts, everything damaged?
It does. 329 ton of hay and the $5,000 some worth of hay of fencing material. It is their full claim. We cannot go over that, but we can consider it, which I think is a wise choice. It does include the fencing.
I'm a little hesitant on the posts and wire and fence and all that. Where we have supplied some of that stuff. And I'm sure we'll continue to supply some of that stuff. I'm not real sure we need to be paying that part of it.
Any other discussion? I hear you. I don't know how to weed that out. I'm not finding that fence breakdown right now.
Mr. President, if you'd like me to provide that fence breakdown, I can try to do that for you.
Yeah, I'm lost on which folder I have open, so if you can get to
It
it.
may take me just a second, but I will try to get there. In fact, I have it right here. So the request in the affidavit was for 6 12-foot posts, 5 rolls of 10-foot woven wire, 3 10-foot cross brace posts, and 15 gripple jumbo packs of 10, 28 gripple T-clip packs of 10, 3+ boxes of 2-inch 9-gauge staple gun staples, and 2 more maker fence pliers.
President, what's the cost of that
Commissioner Bell.
material?
President Brokaw, Commissioner Bell, the cost as submitted in the affidavit was $5,298.55.
Thank you.
Well, and on further discussion, Mr. President, I would just say that I would, I could go along with this, I think, but I want it to be known that the department acted with an honor. They did their due diligence. They acted according to what the regulations that we set from them, and any payment that we pay over the amount does not reflect anything else besides what we're given to. That's just what I'm.
Thanks, Commissioner Roberts. I agree 100%. I think the department did everything they were supposed to. A change in staff, awkward situations. At no time do I feel you dropped the ball on any of this. So I commend you for your work and your efforts. I think it was stated early on about the longevity of the relationship that's been in the past. I think that's critical to moving forward in the future, considering we have production ag in the DSA. We need to work together as landowners and department to push that border back and to try and get more of our state in the free status. So I think there's a lot at stake here in having good relationships. And I think it's up to the commission to move forward with this motion as presented as a good faith effort to repair and move forward with positive relationships that are not going away. Too many elk and brucellosis. And I think that should be our focus, is a forward movement. So
Mr. President,
Commissioner Ladwig, then we'll come to Commissioner Masterson. Commissioner Ladwig.
I want to make it perfectly clear with my motion that I am not having any ill thoughts about the department or the McGinnis's. It seemed to me in the testimony that there was a gap in there with the staff change that happened. There was maybe some misunderstanding of what could be claimed and what couldn't be claimed because of the damage to the hay. It's very evident to the pictures that I saw on the screen that this hay was pretty well shot. And I agree with Mr. President that we got to do something to keep the rapport going between the department and the consumers, the landowners that are feeding these elk. And I like I said, I'm not finding fault with anything. I just think we need to pay for this claim.
Commissioner Masterson.
Mr. President, thank you. I just wanted to underscore what you've heard. You and the department did everything you were supposed to do. And we, as a commission, we've talked about how the damage regs, we might need to go back and take a look at some of those and the way the process works. So it's incredibly important you don't leave here thinking that this is a message that you have done anything wrong. I admire the work you do 24/7, 365, you never get a break. So don't take it as that, okay? And for the McGinnis's, I hope that this will be some communication from you of trying to build back a relationship that is obviously very valuable to our state. And the process is time consuming, and what you submitted to us is really, really well done and very helpful, even though it confused me. But I hope that it helps. And I hope that you can have coffee with these people because they're not bad. And they're not out to get you, even though you've had a rocky few months. And I just hope that that can be repaired. And I know it's going to take a while. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. On the motion before you, all those in favor of the motion to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We are going to take about a 10-minute break. All right, welcome back, everybody. If you would grab your chair.
I don't have any chair.
We're going to do our last presentation.
I'll get down. Yo.
I'm trying to round them up, Doug. Okay, our next agenda item, Deputy Chief Brimmeyer is going to present big game herd unit objectives.
Mr. President, Director Nesbitt, members of the commission. Yeah, for the grand finale for today, I want to leave you with some parting management goals and work that our regions have been doing on big game populations. And so hopefully we'll be able to get this PowerPoint going here and get started. So as you know, each year we come before you and we present some information on our management objectives. And I'm going to try and go back a little bit and give you some background on why we approach these objectives the way we do. And so, you know, management by objectives gives us, it's a plan instead of reactionary accountability. And basically everybody knows where we're going. That's all of our staff, landowners, land management agency, and other stakeholders. And management by objective really comes in 4 stages. That's the monitoring. It's where are we at? Abundance. Abundance is the line transect surveys. It's the siteability estimates that our folks do during the winter. Composition is the flights we do to look at the numbers of fawns to adult does and to the bucks. And we get an estimate on that, kind of how that population is doing that way. Harvest estimates, which right now we're finishing a lot of our hunting seasons and people are starting to do their harvest surveys, and we'll be summarizing those this next couple months. And then also we have our habitat surveys that give us an indication of what those populations can do and what the land can sustain for those animals. The objectives, basically that's the goal where we want to be. And I'll talk quite a bit about those and what objectives we have in our state and what our managers try to strive for. The actions, how do we get there? We use hunting seasons and we often evaluate hunter stakeholder input as we move forward. And then finally, the evaluation during season setting, we're talking to our publics, we're evaluating our data and determining if that's where we want to be and if we need to consider some changes. So across the state, you know, for each of the big game species, we have herd units, and then those herd units are divided up into hunt areas. And I think it'll come a little clearer as I move forward through the rest of the presentation. You'll see the herds that are evaluated by our regions and the hunt areas that those herd units encompass. So if you look at just on the ground, you have a social carrying capacity, and that's what usually our objectives are, kind of what the public really supports. But you also have a carrying capacity that's on the landscape, and that's the carrying capacity of the land. It varies. This is just a hypothetical visual that you can kind of get an idea on how this might play out. But you have these two bounds that you can set your objective within. And if you go above the carrying capacity, usually there's environmental variables that push that population down. As environmental conditions improve, you'll see that black line kind of is a little bit wavy. If you got really good conditions, that could be a little bit higher on the landscape. When you're in a drought cycle, you know, you're down at the lower portion of that, the little bit of the saddle of that curve. Your population, of course, fluctuates between there depending on a lot of variabilities, weather, other things. Again, forage conditions on the landscape, what that landscape can sustain. And so that population kind of moves around in there. And our managers are adaptively managing through hunting seasons, whether or not we should add more licenses or remove licenses to allow that population to change in that fluctuation between the social carrying capacity and where we want to try and be the population objective. So if you look at, let's just take an example of the Medicine Bow pronghorn herd. We have an objective of 40,000 animals, and we're right in there with that population. But that Medicine Bow pronghorn herd encompasses a geographic area where for the entire year, those animals move within that area. We have a little bit of, animals shooting out from one spot or another in an area. And usually our managers try and encompass the geographic area so it covers that entire movement pattern of that herd year round. This one's actually a pretty good herd unit. You'll probably hear more in the future about some of the radio collar work we've got going on there. But pretty much those animals stay close to that boundary and they move seasonally. I got a couple just generic arrows on this map that show you those animals kind of shift a little bit during the year. And along with the objective, so the objective on this case is a 40,000. We also have a strategy that we put on all of our herds to kind of give our managers another additional incentive or a direction to kind of take that population to. And I'll explain that in the next couple slides as well. All of these herd units that I showed you on that previous slide, they are reviewed every 5 years. And so we've got a whole laundry list every year. We're trying to stage through a number of reviews. And those managers, they're looking to see if they should change the existing objective or modify it, depending on where their public's at, where the land status is at, what those populations are doing on the ground. With either of those options, we're always looking at the habitat and we're gauging our public's interest in that. And then what we do each year, usually I present either in July or September. And if you remember the September meeting, we ran out of time on the agenda, so we moved it to this meeting today. So the objectives we have, really there's 5 different types of objectives. And when you look at our herd summaries, like during season setting, you're going to see a little status, some metrics there about the population, and it'll refer to a postseason objective, which is a population estimate based on modeling, a midwinter trend count objective, which is actual count on key winter ranges. There's a satisfaction objective. And then with moose and bighorn sheep, we have some different objectives because they're limited opportunity and we're managing for a high quality hunt for our publics. And so the management strategies, as I mentioned, so the Medicine Bow pronghorn herd was recreational. And what we do with recreational is we're trying to maximize the opportunity for people to be able to participate in that hunt. And we're not trying to maintain super high quality buck ratios or, trophy quality in there. We want to have a good opportunity for people to have a chance to hunt. And there's still some good quality hunting, but the goal is to get more people into be able to participate in hunting. Special management strategies are designed to maintain high postseason ratios for pronghorn, some mule deer, and some of the elk herds. And that's those older age class animals that really people want to target. And so our sheep and moose herds often fall into this category. There's also a private land strategy because our hands become pretty, it's pretty challenging for us to achieve a recreational strategy in areas where access might be limited. And so we also have a default private land designation that you'll see on some of these herd units for strategies. So if you look at, you've got your herd unit objectives. There's the four there really, the limited opportunities, landowner, midwinter trend counts and postseason objective. Remember, the postseason objective is a population estimate. Midwinter trend count, we're actually flying core winter ranges or key areas of the area. And then we're estimating we're coming up with a solid number. That one is used a lot in western Wyoming on some of these elk feed grounds or where you have consistent winter ranges available for those animals. The hunter satisfaction, landowner satisfaction is tied to the harvest survey. And that again, that's based on the satisfaction people report in the harvest survey. Limited opportunity is again, that's for those herd units that have very limited opportunity like bighorn sheep and moose. And we're trying to maintain a pretty high quality hunt. All those objectives go back down to a strategy. And then the strategy is, again, it's either recreational, special, or the private land. So what I'm going to do is go through each of the regions so you can get a perspective on what they reviewed this year. And then we'll touch on a couple of the herd units that are being proposed for some changes this year. So Cody region, starting off with mule deer, they've got the Payne Rock mule deer herd. And for pronghorn, they did Copper Mountain and 15 Mile. And you can see the hunt areas that are encompassing those herd units. For then they did bighorn sheep, Absaroka bighorn sheep herd, and Clark's Fork elk they reviewed internally. And again, the region steps back, looks at what the population metrics are. They're looking at those 4 steps. Where are we at? How did we get there? Do we need to modify what we're doing? And in these herds, they opted to stay where they're at, except for in the Cody region. They have one herd that they are proposing a modification to the objective. And that's the Paint Rock mule deer herd. And you can see the managers here. So you'll see on the left side of the screen, the current objective is 11,000 and managers there would like to move that down to 8,000 to more accurately reflect where that population's been. And this population has a recreational management strategy and then some of the harvest metrics and population metrics you'll see on the kind of on the right side of that slide image with buck ratios, the amount of harvest. And really in the Cody area, mule deer statewide have really been struggling with habitat conditions, recruitment, fawn ratios and survivability, and even predation is in that as well. And the region had meetings in Graybull, Lovell and Warland and met with landowners and they feel this is a proposal that they wanted to move forward with. I'll run through all the regions unless the commission has some questions and we can pause if you're interested.
Sure. Any questions on Cody region? Okay.
All right, moving to the Sheridan region. So Sheridan region had reviewed Pumpkin Buttes, Upper Powder River mule deer, and they're going to propose some changes in those 2 herds. Crazy Women pronghorn, Hazelton pronghorn, Middle Fork pronghorn were also reviewed at their public meetings, and they opted to stay the course on those. And looking at Pumpkin Buttes, the managers there have an objective of 13,000 mule deer, and they're proposing an objective of 9,000. This management strategy here is private land, and I think Rusty's probably most familiar with this, but there's just a lot of private land holdings there, and so managers have that strategy within this herd unit. Now this region has some habitat issues and there's nutritional issues with long-term drought. And so you can see over the last 5 years, that that mule deer herd has stayed pretty much within that range of that 8,000. Now it's down to 4,700. And they propose to move this objective to be more reflective of where that population might be able to move to. And keep in mind that in 5 years, if the population changes again and environmental conditions are really good, those managers will come back and do another review and say, you know what, we're probably on the low side of this and we can do some additional changes here. And so the region is proposing to go to 9,000 elk on Pumpkin Buttes, as well as Upper Powder River. Both those would be 9,000. And again, it's to try and move that to be more in line with where we're estimating those populations at and what we think the land mass can sustain. They've met with, they've had numerous public meetings. They've posted information online, had some webinar, some web presentations, as well as reached out to key landowners. And this is kind of where the region believes that they would like to be at with this change. And lastly, again, fawn recruitment, drought, poor range conditions, and some disease and predation are all some issues that they're kind of facing there. So they're looking at the objective change to be more in line with where it's at now.
Mr. President.
Commissioner Bell.
Doug, thank you. Appreciate this. I think it's something we've in northeastern Wyoming, we've been talking about for a while, and to see it, it's not fun to look at and watch, but it's happening. And so one question I have is how much do we as a department visit with YDOT? You know, I mean, I read through the Pumpkin Buttes presentation here and there's a lot of vehicle collisions on I-90 and I'm certain on Highway 50 and Highway 387. And so I'm just curious, how much do we talk to them about? Is there any fencing things we can do? I know that the crossings that there's really nothing being proposed for I-90, and I'm just curious on what kind of conversations we have with YDOT on that.
Commissioner Bell and Commission President, I believe the region has been working closely because we've just got some of that new data from the Bighorns and Pumpkin Buttes, the radio collar data, and those discussions are ongoing. Of course, the KC to Buffalo has been just recently implemented, and the discussions are ongoing. But as you said, I don't think there's anything proposed right now. I don't know if Tim Thomas is. He's also been monitoring online. I don't know if Samuel, if we can. Is there any way we can let Tim, if he's got an answer for the commission on that one? If not, we can kind of see if he chimes in a little bit.
One thing I would add, Mr. President, if I may. So just in general, across the state, we've agreed with YDOT that any new projects, whenever they do new construction, it will be built in a wildlife friendly way, or in some cases a prohibitive way for wildlife, depending on the situation. But a lot of the work, like Doug said, a lot of the work in those specific areas are done at the local level and not at the statewide level.
Mr. President, can I follow up on that? Director or Doug, who would lead something like that? If we wanted to push for, some sort of a crossing somewhere on I-90, how would that get kicked off? Who would start it? And I mean, is that the Wildlife Foundation? Would they play a role? Would we? That's my question.
Yeah, Commissioner Masterson and President Brokaw. So in 2017, the regions held a transportation summit with YDOT, and we sat down and we took maps, and it was really pretty interesting to see our biologists sitting down with engineers from across the state, and we drew on maps that YDOT and our folks had put together 240 different areas around the state where there were concerns for managers where there was hot spots. YDOT has also plotted a heat map that shows kind of where they're at as well. And so as projects come up, what we do is we've got statewide priorities. And I think Angie's talked about this in previous meetings. We've got those statewide priorities, but local managers, as YDOT works on projects, we hope that they can continue to build a relationship with YDOT so that if there's opportunity to do things that facilitate permeability near the roadways, or if there's hot spots, they can continue to work at a local level. But we also work at the Cheyenne level as well with, Angie's got a great relationship with YDOT in Cheyenne, and they know that we've got certain hot spots.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. So us and YDOT the director of YDOT and myself have an agreement on the top 3 wildlife crossing projects for the state. And that's where a lot of the fundraising effort goes to. That's how I-25 KC to Buffalo got built. That's how Dry Piney was funded. That's how we're now working on Kemmer. So that's what Doug's talking about when he's talking about those really high dollar, large scale projects. And then, you know, then everybody asks, so then are you just discounting or throwing away all the other smaller projects around the state? And that's where Doug's talking about having local folks look at ways to pool local resources and work directly with the local district engineers at the site by site level to do those projects locally. If you have a place in your district that you're interested in, the best place to start is by talking with that local regional wildlife coordinator and just seeing where it's at. Because there's so many of these efforts going on around the state that Angie and I aren't even aware of all of them.
So if you were in Jackson here recently at like the migration work forums that went on last week, you probably have seen that just south of town by South Park, we've got 8-foot fences now that go all the way to Hoback Junction. That was through the work of local managers with YDOT's interest, and then local publics that really wanted to help step up. And so they had a spet ballot, even west of Jackson towards Highway 390 that goes to Teton Village. They're putting in some crossings there that were for moose and for recreationists. And so it's basically a local effort, but it kind of rises to a high level because there's local stakeholders that are kind of helping. And I think Tim Thomas was on regarding the I-90.
He's online. His microphone's not working, so I had him see if we'll connect with his phone. You should be able to talk.
Okay.
Mr. President, so Doug, I got one question on the Upper Powder River. That's in the KC, kind of in that KC area also, right? I saw the map up there.
Yes.
We're still, that's one of the areas that we're still issuing some mule deer doe tags, I think.
Yes, Commissioner Bell and Mr. President, I'd have to look back in the regulation to be specific. But I think what we did last year was we took a critical review of where those were at. And it was specific needs that those regions had identified, and they wanted to maintain that ability to remove a few animals causing damage.
I understand that. I'm also very, very open to taking those mule deer some other way and taking them somewhere else. So if anybody has an idea on that.
Thank you.
And commissioner tags that we can help push that forward.
We can go back to the PowerPoint. That's okay. Thank you. Switching into the Green River region, and I'll show a couple maps then that show what the region reviewed, and we can have a discussion there as well if the commission chooses so. Waiting for it to advance. All right. Green River region, we have the South Rock Springs Mule Deer Herd, South Rock Springs Pronghorn, and West Green River, South Rock Springs, and Petition Elk herds that they reviewed internally. And again, you can kind of see on your maps, on your Chromebooks, and on the screens up above what's been reviewed internally for those folks. Again, they brought these up at public meetings, and they chose to maintain the current objectives for those herd units. And they don't have any proposals on the table for this year. Moving to the Laramie region, the Laramie region does have a proposal that they are changing an objective on, but they reviewed the Goshen Rim mule deer, Chalk Bluffs Pronghorn, Hawk Springs Pronghorn, Meadowdale, Cooper Lake, Centennial. And then they also discussed their Snowy Range elk. And the region is proposing to change the objective on the, Cooper Lake pronghorn herd, if this thing will advance. Nope, go back one, please. So the objective for this herd is 3,000, and they're actually proposing to bump that up to 5,000 antelope. And the reason for that is most of the publics there really want to see, they're concerned about the lack of pronghorn. They want to see more in the population. And so managers are changing that target level again to try and achieve that population level. So it would go to 5,000 if the commission approves that today. And the management strategy here is recreational, and you can see the kind of the herd metrics there with the buck ratios and harvest levels. Moving over to Lander region, if you guys are ready. In the Lander region, the folks there reviewed the Lander moose herd, Whiskey Mountain bighorn sheep, and Shamrock elk. And they are not proposing any changes to those objectives. They talked through things with their publics there and opted to stay at the level on the objectives for these. Switching up into the Casper region, they reviewed South Converse mule deer, and then Black Hills elk, Laramie Peak, mountain elk, and rattlesnake elk. And again, basically where those populations are at and where they're trying to target those populations, they're opting to stay where their goals are set at this point. And they're going to continue to use their management strategies to try and achieve the harvest levels they need to in those herds. Last region is the Pinedale elk or Pinedale region, and they're looking at the sublet moose herd and piney elk. And if you remember, the sublet moose was reviewed 5 years ago, I guess, and we made an objective change there. And managers consistently count a certain number of moose, and they're still managing for a goal of about 1,500 moose. And we typically harvest about 150 animals a year out of that. That's our largest moose herd, and they seem to be pretty static, and they kind of stay pretty stable with their season structure there. Piney elk, just southwest of Pinedale. And again, the managers reviewed that. That's primarily there's feed grounds in that herd unit, and they're managing to kind of have some pretty liberal seasons there. If you remember, in April, we had some later seasons that went into November there to try and move that population down a little bit towards that objective. And that is all of the herd units that the regions had brought forward for this year. And we'll come back again. What we hope is that the commission will vote to approve the objectives, but I'm open for any discussions that you may have.
Thanks, Doug. Any questions? I have a question. So in a region and they evaluated an elk herd and they don't have a recommendation to change the objective. They'll maintain their management strategy to try and get to that objective.
Mr. President, that's correct. So each year during season setting, we're looking at the data that's been collected. So if it's a trend count or if it's population estimate. So in February, they're generating estimates on what that population looks like. And then that first week of March, when we have our preliminary season recommendations, they're given a justification that is attached to the folder that you guys get for the April meeting. And if you have an interest in a specific herd unit, you can look that up and you can see why they're proposing what they're proposing. And all of those seasons should be moving those populations toward that objective. The problem is in some of those areas where access is limited, we can throw all the licenses we want into Chapter 7, the elk reg, but some of those may not sell, and that's why we're exploring some of these other options that you came to light in the last couple of months.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. President. I have,
Yep.
looking at your review, the Cooper Lake pronghorn herd. Right now it was previous objective of 3,000 and you're proposing to go to 5,000. Looking back just little less than 3 years ago, they were at 5,000.
I'm sorry. So they were,
They were at 5,000 just 3 years ago, and now you're proposing to go back up to 5,000 after they went down to 3,000. How do you facilitate raising that objective over a time period of 2,000 animals? Do you cut the licenses dramatically?
yeah, Commissioner Ladwig and, Mr. President, so the population's basically above that goal right now, and so they would either, in my understanding is they would either need to liberalize where they're at, or they can stay a little bit conservative and let that population start to rebound. Keep in mind that pronghorn, if they got ideal habitat conditions with some years in eastern Wyoming, it's a pronghorn factory really, and we can see too, you know, their fawning rate is going to be about, you know, 98% of them are going to have 2 fawns. And so if we have good conditions, they can bounce up to that pretty quick, and they can start to manage and adjust season structure, particularly the type 4 licenses for pronghorn, and they can let that population to rebound. But, and I'd have to look back at that map on it's most likely that population could recover pretty quick.
Apparently it went down pretty quick too, but.
Yeah. If we remember, from 2 years ago, we had that March blizzard, and we cut some licenses out right at the last minute during the April season setting meeting, because those pronghorn, the antelope herds from Casper down through Medicine Bow even did suffer some extraordinary losses. And so we're sensitive to that, but that's how we adaptively approach our management. Our guys are continually monitoring where they're at and what types of licenses we're offering and what we should be doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So,
Mr. President, I did hear back from Tim, and he mentioned that there was only type 8 licenses in either herd unit this year. So the type 8s for white-tailed deer. So they were trying to give the mule deer the benefit of being able to increase. If that answers your question. Thank you.
okay, good. So, the department's recommendation is on that first page for Paint Rock mule deer, Pumpkin Buttes mule deer, Upper Powder River mule deer, and Cooper Lake pronghorn. Those are the 4 requested objective changes. What's the pleasure of the commission?
Mr. President, I would move to approve the recommended objective revisions for Paint Rock mule deer, Pumpkin Buttes mule deer, Upper Powder River mule deer, and the Cooper Lake pronghorn herd units as submitted.
It's been moved by Commissioner Masterson. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Commissioner Roberts. I did not have any public forums in front of me. Any online, Wayne? Any public in the room that wants to speak to objective levels? Any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor to approve, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
That completes my written agenda. Director, do you have anything to add?
I do. So when we're complete, I would ask that you move us into executive session for a 5-minute update on a pending legal issue. But we are going to go into executive session.
Okay, so I'm not going to adjourn the meeting, but we are done with our agenda items. So now I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Mr.
Moved by Commissioner Jolovich. Is there a second?
Oh.
Do you have a
I'll second.
second, and then do you have discussion?
I just
Commissioner
wanted
Masterson?
to make sure a fish person grabbed me after the meeting because I have a couple questions.
Don't leave, fish person, Chief Osterlin. I did, and Wayne said no.